All right, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Orange Crush podcast, another edition of Fridays with Faxon. Today, we don't have like the best week 2 slate. I know we've been giggling a little bit off camera, we've been at my expense, I might add. The behind the scenes stuff it's brutal, guys. It's brutal out here. When you pair Faxon and David together, goofy stuff tends to happen. And I think the best place to start was probably the goofiest college football result we got on Monday night with North Carolina. I know we don't really have them on the pick'em slate, but this is more of a general college football talk deal. And so we got to get the thrashing in. We got to get the jokes in. In fact, I'm going to start with you. Just impressions of North Carolina getting absolutely clobbered by TCU on Monday night.
Yeah, it was rough. It was a rough go of it for the Tar Heels. And, you know, I understand that they've got a new identity and new head coach with Bill Belichick, and we all know the storylines that have surrounded this program. But North Carolina's problem for as long as I've been alive is playing defense just in general, like not run defense, not pass defense, like defense in general has been a massive, massive issue for this team. And last year you give up 70 points to James Madison at home, right? So you make a move and you make a big splash and a big investment in Bill Belichick, who is arguably the greatest defensive mind ever. So what does he do in his debut? 48 points, 542 yards of offense for Texas Christian. I'm starting to think like you just are who you are, regardless of who you hire at this point with North Carolina. And I understand that it's early, and I don't want to close the book on any team after week 1, but that just wasn't a competitive football game. And there was some early quit factor in Chapel Hill that has me alarmed and monitoring the situation. A lot of jogging, a lot of quitting on plays on film, especially on that defensive side of the ball. And that's just not something that Bill Belichick is going to accept. So I'm more just interested, I think would be the main word I use for North Carolina football going forward, because I don't believe that they are this bad, but it was certainly a rocky start for the Tar Heels.
Yeah, where is Drake May, who sucks in the NFL, but he's pretty good in college? Where is he when you need him, right?
Right.
Where is Drake May? Let's get a quarterback out there. Gio Lopez goes 2 hours without completing a pass. How does that happen? You know, this isn't the AFC East. You can't go 2 hours without throwing a pass in college football, right? Like, you just have to. And, you know, the girlfriend, she didn't get to stick around and watch it because it got past her bedtime. She needed to go to bed. Just an absolute thrashing by TCU up there. Kind of expected it a little bit. Expected TCU to win that offense, which, by the way, is kind of the way, you know, college offense is supposed to look. They really ran the football effectively. And now North Carolina gets a while to try and regroup before Clemson comes calling early next month.
You have Charlotte in North Carolina playing on ESPN Plus a little bit after Clemson and Troy is set to conclude. And you mentioned, David, how a college offense is supposed to operate. TCU just ran the football down North Carolina's throat. And even while Josh Hoover was making plays when it was called to, they understood they had an identity and they had an advantage on the line of scrimmage. And every time they just panned over to Belichick, it just got worse and worse and worse. It was a deceptively great start in that first 5-ish minutes where Lopez gets them down there. They force a 3 and out, and then it peaked right there. And so whether that's the peak of North Carolina with Bill Belichick or we're in for more of a circus, I think it's going to be ultimately fascinating to see how this goes. And I'm going to be trying to tune into that ESPN Plus matchup just to see how they respond and how this team regroups.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, you got any more?
I was just going to say, like, I get that it's week 1, but I really hope for North Carolina's sake that they find some level of just identity on both sides of the football going forward, because it's been a really, really rough start in Chapel Hill, and they couldn't run the ball. They couldn't throw the ball. They couldn't play defense. Special teams looked bad. I mean, seriously, like, they were bad at everything. So I think when you're looking for positives, right, it can be hard to find them. And David Hood is certainly looking right now as well. So
what are you
Marcus Allin just gave up another completed pass.
Now, say, I mean, Jordan Dwyer, the Idaho transfer wide receiver for TCU. Jordan's a great dude, I'm sure, and I really respect his ability. I think I could have caught every ball that he caught, and he had like 170 yards because he was wide open with nobody within 5 yards of him every time he caught the football.
It's like Grayson when he goes downtown Clemson, nobody around him.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
We're going to move on to the next game.
I got you, Grayson. You know I'm with you.
Let's go.
You know I'm with you.
We're slowly but surely transitioning into the madness that is the three of our conversations.
David.
at the Smart Family Media Center. But guys, admittedly, the week 2 slate isn't that interesting. It's kind of tough when you have a week 1 slate with Ohio State and Texas, Clemson and LSU, Miami and Notre Dame. Admittedly, still the Belichick experiment before the thrashing was fascinating. Got only a couple games here, so we're going to have to make the most of it. But the noon slate promises to have a nice little matchup between Illinois and Duke. Fighting Illini, traveling down to see if they can take down Manny Diaz after a promising start to that era with Darian Mensah. So we'll start with you, Faxon. Illinois Duke doesn't necessarily on paper look like a great football matchup. I'd watch that in Elite 8 for sure, but big matchup for both.
Yeah, I'm excited for this game. And this is one that I kind of had circled preseason as well because I'm big on Duke this year. And I think they're going to be able to replicate a lot of the success they had last year. Watch the tape from their opener against Elon. Mensah's legit. I understand it's Elon, but I watched this kid the entirety of last year as well at Tulane. Sung his praises in the preseason for a reason and hoping he makes me look smart this year. And I think this is going to be a really big test for Darian Mensah going up against the number 11 team in the country in Illinois that I guess would be in the playoff right now if the season ended. I know it's the AP poll, but they are a top 12 team in the country as things currently stand. They're bringing back Luke Altmaier with a ton of production on both sides of the football up in Champaign. We know they have a good coach in Brett Bielema who's got an identity of that program, and he's really elevated the floor there. And for Illinois, like you're looking to elevate the ceiling. You want a piece of the pie. You want to be able to get in the college football playoff one year as a proof of concept to point to recruits and say, hey, we can win at Illinois and we're not that far away. I believe that to be the case. I like Duke in this spot because they're 13-3 at home over the last 3 seasons, and that's between Elko and Manny Diaz, but they excelled on their home field last year in which they only lost to SMU in that OT game where they missed the extra points and won the turnover margin by 6. Still have no clue how they lost that one, but I think Mensah is enough to get him over the hump here against Illinois, and I think the 3-point spread is pretty indicative of what Vegas thinks of both of these teams. Illinois is probably a little bit better on paper, but this could be a tricky spot for them going on the road to Durham.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a great defensive battle for a lot of this contest. You've got Brett Bielema and Manny Diaz. I tell you what I really like. I think they're going to force Duke into throwing the football. Really like the kid up there, like you just mentioned. But, of course, you know, Illinois has probably the best, if not the best, one of the best safety tandems in the country. Yes. And Xavier Scott and Miles Scott. Those dudes are ballers. They're going to be the difference. They can help stop the running game. They're going to stop Duke throwing the football all over the yard there at Wallace Wade Outdoor Stadium. I like Illinois in this one barely. I think this is going to be one of the – look, and Duke's very capable of winning this football game. This is one of those that's going to come down to a field goal as time expires, I think. And just in my opinion, Illinois pulls it out because I'd take Bielema in a fist fight or a hot dog eating contest over Manny Diaz.
or if you want to have a little sideline beef in a bowl game, you might want to take. There you go. Thank you, Faxon. Thank you for. Oh my gosh! But if this guy's is not an advertisement to watch this on YouTube, if you're listening on Spotify, Faxon just T-posed and spun twice. If that's something you've wanted to see from your beloved
Shane Beamer is incensed on the sidelines for South Carolina with something Brett Bielema was doing on the other sidelines. We have that as an intro to our station at 105.5. So I'm very familiar with that.
Boy, mad.
Yeah, he made him mad.
He made him very mad. Shout out to Coach Beamer, though. Big win for him this last weekend.
Oh, big win. So I'm going to take Illinois in this one. I just think they're marginally better. I think Duke, this is a season where they're going to prove their floor and their ceiling have been raised, especially with a new quarterback in Mensah. I just like Illinois a little bit better. They got more of an identity so far this season, and they're able to progress just because of the pieces they brought back from 2024. So I just like them purely. It's early. If this was November, I'd probably take Duke, but I still think it's figuring it out. Forget Duke only put up, I think, 10 against Elon at halftime. So starts maybe a little slow here, but I'm going to take Illinois just barely. So I'm going to side with David on that one. One of the other few on this slate that are slightly and marginally interesting, I have Ole Miss heading to Kentucky trying to avenge an upset loss from last year. Do the Wildcats have a semblance of an offense, or can Ole Miss exercise some demons early in the season? Faxon, I'll start with you.
I think Ole Miss is going to give Kentucky the belt, and I think Lane Kiffin's going to try and run it up as much as possible and rub it in the face of Mark Stoops as much as possible, if you want me to be honest with you. I watched a little bit of Kentucky-Toledo last week. It's going to be a long year in Lexington. We're going to leave it at that. And Zach Calzada is not a good quarterback. He hasn't really been a good quarterback at any stage of his career at any destination. Nothing personal. It just kind of is what it is. You're at your third P4 now. It hasn't worked at the other two schools for a reason. You're finally getting your shot. And in your first game, you're under 50% completion percentage and under 100 yards passing against Toledo from the MAC. That leads me to believe that the SEC slate is not going to go so kindly for Mr. Calzada. Now, I will say this, Kentucky always has a really solid infrastructure on defense. And I tend to believe their defensive coordinator is one of the more underrated in the country, but they can just never score on these SEC teams. How many rock fights have we seen in the 12 o'clock window from Kentucky these past few years against a Georgia? They had Texas on the ropes at one point last year. They can keep other teams off the scoreboard. The issue is actually putting the ball in the end zone consistently. I don't think they have the pieces to do that. I think this one could get a little ugly towards the end. And I think since last year, like you talked about, Grayson, with the revenge factor for Kiffin, who's known for theatrics and showboating anyways, I think he tries to rub Kentucky's nose in it in their home stadium. I'm taking Ole Miss by 20.
You know what really shocks me about Kentucky? They were competitive with Georgia. Was it last year, 2 years ago? Yeah. They beat Ole Miss last year in a year in which they went 4-8. But it's Kentucky. It's the SEC, and you kind of always expect better. Did you know that Mark Stoops is 28-62 in SEC play?
It's not good.
28-62. That's not good. They always kind of come up with an upset each year. But they were not very good against Toledo last week. I watched the quote-unquote highlights, and there were no highlights. You're right. Calzada under 100 yards. Come on, man, against Toledo. And Toledo's not terrible, but they're not great. Come on. It's Kentucky. You should be beating them worse than that. And, Lane Kiffin, I think it was his first year. They went up there for the COVID game, and it was like a 42-41 contest. It's always been tight between these two programs. I think that Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin do a little bloodletting this week. I think this one's going to get nasty, ugly.
It's going to be an FCS score, and the Kentucky Wildcats are going to wish they had my expertise with my Kentucky dynasty from CFB 25. It's not going to be the same result this go around, so I'm going to roll with Ole Miss. Big. This could be one of those situations where Kiffin has some sort of viral moment when they're up 49-3.
I could see Lane throwing the clipboard up 21-3 and Stoops getting super pissed and there being a chirping match after or something along those lines.
Let's love it. Under or over one fight, or I guess I got to put it at 0.5 fights in this game.
Oh, over.
Yeah.
Okay,
that's don't like each other.
That's what you're gonna look for. Something that actually, now this game on paper, if you had presented this to me a few weeks ago, I probably would have scoffed at it and felt like, I don't know. It just doesn't really feel like that's a contest. But after what I saw last week with USF, I do think that there's a marginally small chance, but still a chance, with the gamer that they have in Byron Brown, to go in there into the swamp and create some chaos. What say you, Mr. Childress? Is there an upset brewing, or is Florida going to be okay here?
Yeah, we do our little contest with the point spreads every week at the Roar, and I took South Florida with the 17.5. As far as an outright upset goes, I don't see it in the cards because of the defense. Could I be convinced that Brown could cause some game plan issues for Florida, especially early in the year where you're not super comfortable on that side of the ball yet and you don't have all the communication errors worked out and you're still looking for your identity? Yeah, sure. I think Galesh and Brown and those playmakers on offense are going to have a chance to put up some points on Florida. I think the narrative has maybe gotten a little bit out of control because of the scoreline of that game being 34-7. Boise State outgained South Florida. Boise State beat Boise State more than South Florida beat Boise State in my eyes. And that's somebody that picks South Florida to win the game and is a little bit lower than on Boise State in comparison to most. But they were able to move the ball pretty consistently, both through the air and on the ground. And I think Lagway is going to have a field day. So give me the Gators by a comfortable amount. But I do think that Galesh and Brown and all those guys are going to be able to put up some points going the other way. I don't know if they can stop Lagway.
Before we get back to this video, we'd like to thank the title sponsor for this podcast, Newton, Scott & Associates. This team is headlined by Jeff Scott, former Clemson assistant coach and two-time national champion, as well as Eric Newton, a longtime local and trusted real estate partner. These two are teaming up to provide a first-class experience for all Clemson fans. Whether you're looking to buy, sell, or build in the upstate area of South Carolina, you can trust Newton Scott and Associates. Choose the same team that Clemson coaches are selecting when they're looking to buy, sell, or build, all the way from Tigertown to Lake Kiowee. For more information, you can find them at newtonscottsc.com or by calling the number 864-722-9062. That's 864-722-9062. Now, let's get back to the video.
Is anybody taking a look at what Florida has coming up over the next few weeks? Are they going to be ahead? They have to go to LSU next week, and then they go to Miami of Florida. Then they host Texas, and then they have to go to Texas A&M. You better win this one, right? Because that's a gauntlet. I mean, you could be a really good team and lose two of those. And again, you could be a really good team and just lose two of those because that schedule's so tough. I think that Billy Napier understands what's ahead of him. He'll have his guys dialed in on this one. Maybe you don't get the players dialed in so early. Maybe it's a little sluggish. Maybe you look up in the second quarter. South Florida's got a lead, but eventually Florida's going to realize what needs to happen, and they're going to pull away.
I think we could be in the press box on Saturday, and one of us is going to do that score check when this game's going down, and you may throw some text around, or Faxon, you may come over and be like, "Oh, USF's up 7-3 on Florida," and then a half hour later we check and USF's down by 20. It just could be one of those situations where I think USF's good enough to keep it close early, but Florida's talent, again, the slate, not very encouraging, so we're kind of picking at straws here, picking at a needle in a haystack type of thing. But this final one, and then we're going to give Faxon's thoughts on Troy and just overall wrap a nice little bow on LSU from last week. But this final game proves to be the main event. Very, very exciting. Michigan and Bryce Underwood, who I know that Michigan wasn't playing somebody very ferocious, but he looked pretty good and looked pretty natural there. A star is certainly brewing for the Wolverines, going to play Oklahoma in a Brent Venables squad that could desperately use a marquee win early with John Mateer and this revamped Oklahoma team. This is a fun one, guys. It's going to be great matchup. Faxon, let's start with you. Michigan and Oklahoma. What do we got?
I'm taking my guy BV, man. I mean, friend of the program. I'm not going to pick against Coach Venables. I've got a couple thoughts. I think Michigan's underrated. That's going to be my first thought. I'm going to pick Oklahoma to win the football game, but I think Michigan's underrated. And I think people are undervaluing line of scrimmage play when evaluating Michigan and hyperfixating too much on how bad the skill position and quarterback situation was last year. The reason that Michigan was the best rushing team in the country the year they won the national championship is because they had good wide receivers and a good quarterback, or at least a good enough quarterback to where that had to be respected. So you're still going to get some too high shells, and you're still going to get a couple looks that are going to be favorable for the run, where you're going to be able to create those numbers within the box. Last year, the problem was you might as well have had us three out there playing receiver for Michigan and quarterback. And I'm not sure if it would have made a major difference on the impact of their record in the season. I'm being dead serious. Like, there were games where Michigan's defense was more of a threat to score than their offense. So I do think Michigan is going to be improved this year. I would classify them as maybe a dark horse sleeper to get to the college football playoff, especially if they can beat Ohio State like they have the last couple of years. But I think at this point in the season, I'm leaning towards Oklahoma because they have better players and better talent. And I am doing that knowing that the line of scrimmage thing could get me burnt. I think it's going to be a competitive football game. I think Underwood's going to be a star. I'm not sure he's there yet. But I think this is one that, with the home field advantage, under the lights, big-time game for Brent Venables, and honestly his biggest in ages that he really needs to win, if we're being honest with ourselves. I think BV's group does enough to get him over the top. Give me OU 27-21 over Michigan.
So let me ask this, knowing what both teams have on the schedule the rest of the year, knowing that the non-conference schedules are not great beyond this game, is this, the type of game the loser can all but forget the playoffs?
I was going to say, yeah, like this could be an interesting one where we look up at the end of the year and one of them's 10-2 and one of them's 9-3 and one of them's in and one of them's out. And it's because of this game. Like, I could see something like that happening.
Yeah.
It's like a pseudo elimination game.
It really is. And, John Mateer was great last week, 392 yards through the air, and they really didn't even unleash their playbook. And granted, look, it's not very good competition. Michigan only threw for over 200 yards in 2 games last year, and the high was 208. Underwood went for 251 last week, I think. and, really had that offense humming. But this is going to be about Brent Venables and the defense. They were very vanilla last week. They did not unleash that pass rush at all. They kind of held things in check. It was very Dabo-esque in an opener against an unmatched opponent. So I think Brent Venables is going to finally turn those guys loose. Underwood's going to be great, but turning the kid loose at Oklahoma with those rabid Sooner fans under the lights, nah, you're going to give me OU in this one. I trust BV. That kid's going to be seeing ghosts.
I think the lights of Norman are going to be bright. I think Oklahoma fans certainly understand and what we're going to relay. They're going to look at that SEC schedule and think to themselves, they got to get this one now. They got to get something marquee, something signature, because there's going to be losses that come down the road. I think this is where John Mateer's Heisman campaign really begins. I think he's going to shine under the bright lights. You may as well put up a sign that has his Venmo account on there to start sending him installments, Oklahoma fans, because he's going to take you to the college football playoff. I think this is going to be a big year for Brent Venables, where he really starts to cement himself as the guy at Oklahoma, and a lot of those doubts start to get cast aside. I'm going to take Oklahoma to win this one. I'm going to think that Michigan's going to compete well. They just don't have the dudes on defense like Oklahoma does, and I think that the Sooners are going to get this one. So, Faxon, one of the great parts about having you on this show is we get to tie a little bow on everything we've learned this week with Clemson. And with this week, it's been a little contentious. Dabo Swinney went pretty scorched earth in his presser. Cade has to be better. Garrett Riley's got to be better. Everybody's got to be better. A 58 grade. If I came home with that, it'd be a bad day. It'd be a bad day with a 58. But Faxon, thoughts on Troy and just overall, what do you want to see on Saturday against the Trojans? A eerily similar spot to App State last year.
I've got a lot of thoughts, and I think you framed that very well, Grayson, so I hate to do this right now. I do have a Venmo-related kind of like joke and quip to get in here on the Mateer thing. If you'd like to fund Grayson Mann this weekend in downtown Clemson, I'm going to put it right here. I don't think you can see it. It's at Grayson-Man-5 on Venmo. He will not be using it for sports gambling like John Mateer. He will be using it for $2 PBRs at Triple T's. So shout out to the PBR Army. Had to get that plug in there too. So thank you for that, Grayson. David looks like he's got a comment, but that might be the stupidest time we ever use here on the podcast ever. So
if David's got a comment, it's going to be PG, David. Remember who's paying the bills.
Well, I'm just going to say, if we're going to get Grayson a date, shouldn't the beer money be going to the girls?
It's a good point. I mean, someone's got to buy a drink around here, so...
As Clemson and LSU and Clemson and Troy,
right.
on that, we've talked excessively throughout the course of the week. I'm sure we all have, whether on air, off air, public, private circles. I mean, we all have thoughts on the team, and it was a disappointing performance, and it would be incorrect to describe it as anything but. To have back-to-back home games. And this is what I keep coming back to. And I think there's positive to take. I still think Clemson is national championship level good on paper with the roster. And I think there is a reality in which they ascend to that level throughout the course of the season. But you've had back-to-back home games in which your defense has allowed 17 points to SEC opponents, and you couldn't get to 18 in either one of them. That's my biggest takeaway from the weekend is like, whether we want to blame Cade, and I say we meaning, the fan base, whether you want to blame Cade, whether you want to blame Garrett Riley, whether you want to blame Dabo, whether you want to blame the O-line, the running backs, the receivers, like everyone has to be better on the offensive side of the ball. The defense was good enough to win on Saturday night. Tom Allin has whipped that unit into shape quicker than I anticipated. And I thought Ronan Hannafin was a star. 47's the best player on the football team. Not really sure if that's debatable at this point with the way that he's flying to the football. I get all the NFL stuff. I think Sammy's better. And then on top of that, like your D-line showed up. How about Stefan Green, man? He was awesome. So Clemson has a championship level defense on paper, and it appears they have a championship level coach on defense for the first time in 3 years now on that side of the ball. Those things need to be taken away as positives, because if you're holding LSU to 17, I think the negativity from the fan base hyper fixated at the offense has drawn us away from the point of how good the defense was. Clemson won't play a better quarterback than Nussmeier. Clemson probably won't play a better offense or team than LSU all year, and you only gave up 17. So to separate all of that, headed into Troy, we need to see some confidence and identity on offense. That's the number one thing I'm looking for. I'm not worried about the defense. You roll the ball out, and Clemson's not going to give up 21 points to Troy in any reality, barring some massive blown coverage and or offensive turnover that leads to a defensive touchdown. The issue here is on offense. How can you run the ball with running backs for more than 19 yards in one game? How can you get too comfortable and on script early in games so that his footwork and his mechanics can calm down like they did against SMU and Texas early in games last year, and not South Carolina and LSU Cade, right? Those are the things I'm looking for. I think the scripted drive is huge for me. That's the number one thing I'm going to be paying attention to, is Clemson's first scripted drive on offense. What is GR doing to adapt to make Cade's life easier? I think that's the biggest question of the weekend. And I'd like to see the run game get a little bit of an identity as well, with those big boys pushing around Troy up front.
Can't say it much better than that. I think Clemson needs to just come out and beat Clemson and establish that running identity, throw the football all over the yard, get Vizina some work if at all possible. And this will be in honor of Lee Corso, who retired last week. My first ever headgear pick.
Oh.
Yes, David.
I don't know which mascot he's going for, but he's just waving. This has been
It's not a tiger, it's a fox. I get it. It's the only headgear that I have here, but I'm going to go the Tigers. Big over Troy in this one. And then hopefully you can meet a fox downtown later. That's what this is all about. This is your headgear pick, Grayson. We're just bringing it. Here we go. Let me wave again. I have Clemson big.
I have no idea how else to wrap this up than just to. That was something else by Mr. David Hood, Clemson Media's finest in the Fox hat. Guys, thank you as always for tuning in. Fridays with Faxon for the rest of the way should prove to be quite the experience. So if you want to subscribe for more of this, or maybe contemplate why you spent 25 minutes doing it, feel free to leave a comment down below. Guys, thank you as always. Be sure to Venmo me, or try to Venmo Faxon as well for some nice little PBR army. Shout out to them. Guys, God bless y'all. Have a good one.